Hey everyone, Yang and Zhao back again. Today, continue with the D&D, and let's talk about Eberron, Rise from the Last War, which is perhaps the perfect book for people who want to make their own campaign, but maybe don't have the time or, let's be honest, the ability to come up with a lot of the deep background lore. Thanks for coming back, guys. So when we look at the D&D adventure books written by Wizards of the Coast, we're talking anything outside of the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, or the Monster Manuals. We can really divide them up into three categories. So category number one is a supplemental guide that enhances the game and enhances what's already there. So when we're talking about these, we could really consider Xanathar's Guide to Everything and Volo's Guide, those kind of enhancements. They don't really add any story or anything like that, but what they do add is a lot of customizable features, new spells, new items, things to help the game along, more background on monsters and how you might want to play them in your world. Then the next kind of book would be what I call the no muss, no fuss adventures. So this is something like a Tomb of Annihilation or the great recent edition Avernus, where, yes, there are some upgraded items and there's probably some new spells and stuff, but it's mostly a story-driven book. So you can take characters through level 1 through level whatever. Oftentimes it's 10 or maybe 15. And as a DM, you don't really have to think of a whole lot yourself. You could just read the notes, prep. It doesn't take nearly as much time. You don't have to spend hours and hours of lore and world building and things like that. It's just a little bit, okay, at this point, they're going to encounter these guys. They got to go find this thing. They're very nice. And then the third kind of book that they put out is somewhat in the middle. This is a fuss and muss guide. And that's what we're really looking at when we're talking about this new Eberron release. It's a great book that has all the lore, a lot of backstory, history, some new upgrades to different characters and races and whatnot, but it doesn't really have the progression that you would have in some of those others that I had mentioned. Now, what this does have is a heck of a lot of character. It's got history of this area called Eberron. It's got a detail of this last war. Now, the warforged, which are mechanical beings, were supposed to have come from here, or they were heavily used in this last war. And the whole setting is very pulpy, noir-y, almost fantasy steampunk, I guess you would say. So if you're looking for a campaign that has that time period, like let's call it like an 1800s-ish time period versus something earlier like a 1400s Knights on Crusade, this is definitely for you. It's got a lot of what I call fantasy steampunk, which is basically the science. You have the items that you would have in a steampunk universe, but instead of relying on the science for it, it relies on magic, which I have to say is one thing that always made me wonder about a lot of these campaigns. You run across all these wizards and all these magic users, and like nobody uses it to make like a refrigerator or an air conditioner. I mean, you would be the richest dude in the world just selling air conditioners to people in all these desert regions. All right, but anyways, rant over. So let's talk about the book itself. There's a lot of upgrades in building your own character. Now, these character creations cover the basic races that you can find in this land. And I'm not really going to go too much into it other than to say it sort of has a more chapter on shapeshifters, which is very cool. It has they have different kinds of lycanthropy. So like a werewolf or a were-dog, or I don't know, shift into whatever. But that's a pretty cool upgrade. And then it has changelings, which sort of, I guess you could mimic other people or other species or whatnot. And then we get into something called dragon marks. Now, dragon marks are tied to specific houses or a specific lineage that resides within each different race. So each race will have its own. So humans will be different from half-elves, will be different from halflings, from orcs, etc., etc. There might be some overlap, but generally no. Now, these marks are interesting. They would kind of be like, you could say they're like tattoos, but not necessarily. And these would give your characters enhanced abilities within a subclass. So, for example, if you had the Dragon Mark of Detection that goes with the half-elf race, they tend to, the guilds or the lineage would specialize in bodyguards, investigation, and risk management. And then it's got details for all of these guilds, what they specialize in, who the leaders are. So it adds a lot of complexity into making your character and helping people to make backgrounds. One of the interesting things to me about this is in previous editions of D&D, like 3, 5, and 4, people often complained that it was too complex, and D&D 5 was really a paring down, getting back to basics to allow anybody to jump in, so it's much easier. A lot of people like the older versions, though, and to me, this seems to add a lot of that complexity back, a lot of the fine detail. You can tune your own specialized character without overburdening it and without making it too difficult for newbies. Another nice thing about this book and the character creation, it finally has the official Artificer class. So anyone who is a fan of Critical Role, you would have seen Tyrion Darrington a couple years ago, played by Sam Riegel. He was the first Artificer that sort of showed up on a large stage, and he was very popular. So Wizards of the Coast, they kept working on it. They released a Artificer's Guide earlier in the year. I can't remember exactly when it was, like May or something, May, June. And this looks like it's the final version, the official version that is out of the UA. Going along with the mechanical or pseudo-scientific methodology of this update, we have a lot of very cool magical items that you can use. For example, arcane propulsion arm, prosthetic appendage that was developed by Artificers. When you attune to the item, it is a prosthetic. It magically forms a copy of the appendage it's replacing. It is a fully capable part of the body. It's a magic melee weapon. With your proficient, it deals 1d8 force damage hit and has the thrown property. A normal range of 20 feet and a long range of 60 feet. When thrown, the prosthetic detaches and flies at the target. So you're basically launching a fist into the air. That's pretty cool. There's an arm blade that will attach and become inseparable to you. So if you wanted to go all Wolverine or the Max, you can absolutely do it. And I saw in here there are also some magical lungs which replace your lungs. You're therefore immune to any sort of breathing poison, and you can even breathe in outer space. So there's a lot of very cool, scientific-y, steampunky magical items that also come with it. Very nice addition. So in addition to all of the lore that they have with pre-made religions, with guilds, with different factions, you also get the setting. This all takes place on the continent of Khorvaire. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'm sure many of you will let me know in the comments. So this is a continent that's broken up basically into 5 nations. And all the major areas are connected by a lightning rail, which is sort of like a magical high-speed train. If you know what the Japanese Shinkansen is, think of that. There are also airships that you can take to get to and fro. Now, this is a very wide area. There are different kind of climates and different kind of terrains. You can start in different places. It's got background on all of them, and it also has the history of what happened in the last war and how does that affect each area. So, what do you think, guys? Eberron, yay or nay? And how the heck do you pronounce the name of that continent? I'd love to know. All right, so I got to cut this one short. Mercifully shorter video today. I got the survey on making your own D&D supplements and what people like. We'll have that a little bit later in the week, and probably soon we will have a Season 3 review of The Expanse, a Season 4 preview, and if the mail ever gets here, we'll have some reviews of Downcast and Soulfinder. So everyone, thanks for listening. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments.